webinar tonight. We're going to cover the proposed master plan development or master PD review process that the staff has been working on for the past several months. With me tonight, we have the co-hosts this evening are Nina Adamudia. I always stumble over that one a little bit. She's an assistant commissioner with the DPD Commissioner's Office. We have Cindy Rubik, who's an assistant commissioner with the Planning Bureau and also the team leader for the Central Regional Planning Team. We have Noah Sifranek, the lead DPD staff person for the Chicago Plan Commission or the CPC. And we have Emily Thrun, one of the central team planners and also a staff person who's been taking on some of these larger scale development projects as the project manager. And then we also have the chairman of the Plan Commission, Teresa Cordova, who is also the director of the Great Cities Institute at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And really quickly, I just also want to acknowledge that we have from our DPD Communications Bureau, Kevin Bargness here tonight, helping us out, as well as Kamal, hoping I'm pronouncing that right, Mansur, and I want to thank both of them for helping us pull this webinar together this evening. I'm going to kick it really quickly to Teresa, who would like to say a couple brief words.
Just want to welcome everyone. Teresa Cordova, Director, as she said, of Great Cities and Chair of the Plan Commission. Just want to welcome you all and thank you for taking time out of your evening. Your input is critical to this process, and we very much appreciate the time and interest and attention that you're giving to this. So thank you, and keep the questions and the comments coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And now I want to turn it over to Nina, and she's going to give us a brief little statement on behalf of the Commissioner's Office.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thanks for participating tonight. Again, my name is Nina Adamudia. I am the Assistant Commissioner for the Commissioner's Office, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Commissioner Maurice Cox tonight. As many of you know, the Plan Development Review process is the city's best tool to ensure that large development projects move forward in an appropriate context with local neighborhoods. Each plan development goes through an enhanced review and approval process that ensures that every relevant city agency is consulted and local residents have ample opportunity to provide input. Of course, not all PDs are the same. Some are significantly larger than others, and they deserve more examination given their scope and size. That's why this last year, Mayor Lightfoot and Plan Commission Chair Teresa Cordova directed our planning department to update and review the approval procedures for Chicago's largest construction projects. These proposed rules apply to what are frequently called mega projects, which is a poorly defined term used chiefly in the media. The guidelines define exact criteria for what we're calling master plan developments or master PDs. Moving forward, master PDs will require new public meetings organized by the City of Chicago to enable community organizations and members of the public to become more involved in earlier stages of the project's development. This early look can help the developer, the community, and the city fully evaluate long-term implications of proposed master PDs and ensure they seamlessly integrate into the surrounding environments. We think this enhanced engagement is fundamental to sustainable neighborhood investment, while also fostering equity, resiliency, and smart growth. We have a lot to cover today, so I will leave plenty of time for questions. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Nancy.
Thanks so much, Nina. So I want to just give a little background. As Nina said, this process started with Mayor Lightfoot and Teresa Cordova charging us to look at these master PD projects. These master PDs include the largest redevelopment proposals that come through the city and are reviewed and approved and are typically multi-phased, multi-year, large-scale, comprehensive development projects that cover large swaths of land. Past examples include like Lincoln Yards and the 78, for those of you who have been part of the development process. The proposed master PD process is actually an addendum to DPD's development manual. And this development manual is a guide for all the development proposals that go through the zoning review and the Plan Commission review process. Plan Commission will make a review, hold a public hearing, and will either take action if it's a lakefront application, or like PDs and these master PDs, they'll make a recommendation to the Committee on Zoning, and then they will make a recommendation to the City Council. The current proposed addendum to this development manual includes a master PD, proposed master PD review process, master PD community meeting guidelines, an updated supplemental materials and studies requirements section specific for these master PDs, and a community impact assessment form, which is an additional supplemental document that's going to be required for master PD submittals. All of these documents have been available on the city's website, and the link is shown here on this first page. I'm going to start out by just covering some quick objectives. When we set out to take on this assignment to look at creating a master PD review process, there were really 4 key objectives that we were looking to bring forth. We wanted to really create a more defined review process and community engagement process for these large-scale multi-phased development projects. Secondly, we wanted to establish defined thresholds for these projects that would require to be following this master PD review process. Third, we wanted to update and expand the types of standards and requirements for these supplemental studies and materials that might be required for these larger scale development projects, because again, a lot of them have unique aspects that require some additional study. And finally, we wanted to reinforce the need to assess these projects in the context of the surrounding community area and make sure that we are looking at that full area that might be impacted by these projects. This process has been a little bit of a labor of love. We started this last fall, and that was when our new chairman, Teresa Cordova, had come on board, as well as our new commissioner. And we started looking at this. And initially, what the staff was primarily focusing on was coming up with a master PD review process. We proposed an amendment to, again, the standard PD process, and presented that along with kind of an informational form that we had framed out that was talking about the different changes to the sites and the development. Those documents were presented to the Plan Commission in October of 2019. We opened up for public comment through December of 2019. And then we actually received quite a few comments, some really, really good comments about that. Most of them were talking about the importance of re-emphasizing the community engagement process and making sure that there was some maybe rules or guidelines for community meetings. There was a lot of emphasis on improving some of the requirements for these studies and supplemental materials. And so as we were reviewing these comments that came in, it became very clear to us we needed to expand the scope of this master PD addendum and really take on these additional pieces and do them all comprehensively. Staff began work on this in the late spring, and by October we had completed the updated DPD or master PD review process. We had created guidelines for master PD community meeting guidelines, specifically for the master PDs. And we had also looked at and enhanced and updated the supplemental studies and materials sections specifically geared for master PDs. In addition, we revamped and recreated this supplemental form so that we could really focus on what we're calling a community impact assessment form. And it really wanted to focus on understanding what's existing in the community area, as well as the incremental changes to the site. So we are currently, where we are currently right now is we are in the public comment period for this revised document and documents in this addendum to the development manual. These documents have been posted on the Plan Commission website, and public comment period is open through December 16th, 2020. I want to just talk briefly about the thresholds. Again, when staff presented this the first time, we had some base level thresholds based on the gross site area, the gross floor area. In the time that we've been reviewing this a little bit further and looking at some of the current development trends, staff felt it was really important to enhance the threshold standards. And we now look at not only the gross area, but also the net area that's going to be developed. We also have set thresholds for not only the total square foot of floor area, but also that incremental increase, because we want to make sure that we're capturing significant changes in floor area and developable area in these development sites. And then we're also looking at the number of dwelling units, as well as hotel rooms and what we're calling these group living spaces, where there's rooms or dwelling units that are rented out by room as opposed to by unit. And again, looking at the total number as well as the incremental increase, because we want to make sure that we're capturing these projects that have a significant increase over what's existing right now. Similar to the first time we did this, we have two levels for these thresholds. We've set standards for the private development, and then we've set standards for city-owned or the city, where the city is a co-applicant on the projects. And those standards are a little bit lower. In addition, as we are reevaluating this, we realized waterfront sites are really, really sensitive areas. And we have now brought those in, regardless of whether they're private or public. Those are now coming down to the lower threshold standards. So these are the current proposed thresholds for master PDs. I want to highlight really quickly the kind of framing out the review process. Obviously, there's a lot more detail when these projects, any PD comes through, but this is a framework for the standard PD review process. The blue boxes are the ones for a standard PD. These red boxes are the ones that show the additional steps that are going to be required for master PDs. For master PDs, the applicants are going to be expected to do what we call a pre-application community meeting, a community meeting really early in the process where there's enough information that they can present the concept to the stakeholders, but where the plans are not quite finalized so that they can seek some input and hopefully take that input to help improve the projects. We've also incorporated regular working meetings with the developer and the staff to make sure that we're all keeping on track with what the staff expects to see in terms of deliverables and the scopes and the studies and the design. And we also want to make sure that we're aware of any changes that are being done through the process along the way. As part of that, we would also sit down with the applicants and make sure that we do a scoping study on these significant studies to make sure that we agree with the assumptions that they use, the area that they might cover, and the kind of methodology and scope that they're going to be approaching. The other added step is we have a follow-up community meeting as needed. And if the project changes along the way, we think it's very important to make sure that the applicant goes back out and provides the community another opportunity to weigh in on the project. Once we get through the application review, that's the standard process. We go to Plan Commission for public hearing. Again, standard and master PD follow the same process. Go to the Committee on Zoning, Landmarks, and Building Standards. Go to City Council for a vote. The other change for master PDs is because these projects tend to be large and are developed over a long time, the applicant typically comes in with a just maybe the first phase designed. And then the rest of the development or the PD approval includes supplemental or future phases that has zoning standards that are approved as well as design standards. Currently, those are reviewed under an administrative site plan review process to make sure that they're consistent with the ordinance requirements for the design and the zoning. But now for master PDs, those projects are going to be brought back through a review process to make sure the public sees it as well as the Plan Commission. Excuse me. The other piece of this that is really important for these master PD projects was to really enhance the community engagement piece. We had gotten a lot of comments when we came through for the first presentation of the master PD review process, and there was a lot of both comments and questions and recommendations to make sure that there was a defined community process, that there were guidelines, and that to make sure that when these projects are coming through, all interested members of the community can get involved and provide comments. So what we've done with this master PD addendum is, again, we're emphasizing the importance of the community engagement. As you notice in the chart, we've got community meetings are defined steps in the master PD review process. We've got a specific web pages that are set up for these master PDs so that members of the public can see the presentations that are coming in, as well as if there's a public meeting, some of the results of those public meetings and how the projects evolve over time. And then, as mentioned before, we have this enhanced site plan review process where they will come back for these future developments as those become defined for both public and Plan Commission review. In addition, we've created some master PD community meeting guidelines. And again, this was in direct response to comments that we received from the public. And these guidelines, what we've done is we've reinforced that the impacted aldermen for these areas that might be covered, the DPD staff should be consulted and involved when the applicants are looking to set up these meetings and in setting the community areas and making sure that all the key stakeholders are being invited to these meetings. We've also included guidance on how to define those community meetings to make sure that we're capturing all the interested people and the people that could potentially be affected by these projects. We've included some guidelines on how to organize and notice these meetings, as well as the meeting follow-up. And we've encouraged multiple platforms, not just a community meeting, but other means to try to get the word out and to present the project, and also to solicit input from key stakeholders. With this revised addendum, we also looked at the supplemental materials and studies section of the development manual, and we completely updated it and readapted it and added some more requirements for master PDs. Specifically, what we did is we added 2 new kind of studies and forms that are going to be required. One of them we talked about a little bit is this community impact assessment form. And that form requires the applicant to provide some information about, you know, the schools and the facilities and parks and those types of things that are in the surrounding community area, as well as some information about housing and the commercial and the parking changes on site, so that we can get a sense of not only what is existing in the neighborhood, but how this development might impact or support the other facilities and schools and parks in this community area. The other piece of this is a community services, facilities, and housing study. This might be required if the project manager from DPT determines that there's enough potential significant impacts that we require some additional study of how this development might impact these local neighborhood schools or the parks or the housing stock. And it's going to require the applicant to do a little bit more detailed look at those types of facilities and how those potential impacts might be able to be mitigated. And then we also identified up front some studies and materials that are going to be required for every master PD. So there's going to be a kind of menu of studies that might be required depending on the scope, but there's going to be 4 base requirements regardless of where this PD is located, regardless of the size, the intensity. And that's going to be the community impact assessment form, the traffic and transportation study, the economic impact study, and a statement or narrative that explains their compliance with all the city's policies, plans, and other initiatives. I want to briefly now just go through some of the changes. Some of you who are participating tonight provided comments on the original proposal. So I just want to quickly kind of talk about where we were and where we are now. And then we'll be wrapping up and opening up for some questions. So the original, as I mentioned before, the original Master PD addendum, we really were focusing on the process. We had set up some base level standards just based on gross area, total floor area, and had that distinction of private versus city. The new standards for the thresholds take a little bit more look at both the gross and net areas, and also the total areas of square footage, the total number of units, as well as incremental increase, because those changes can have an impact on the surrounding community. We also have that same threshold, different thresholds for private and city, but also brought in the waterfront properties to have a lower level, to follow the lower level thresholds because of those sensitive areas. The PD review process, again, originally, we were focusing on having community meetings and making sure that we had regular scoping meetings with the applicants. We've expanded that in the new review process to include those things, as well as we've included a step for an early concept review meeting so that people can come in and even before they put pen to paper and talk about what they think they might want to do, maybe before they close on the property, so that they can have a conversation with staff and DPD and figure out, are you on the right path to something that works well with this community area? Again, we also have the enhanced site plan review process for future development to make sure that we get some public and plan commission reviews of those future developments. And then we've gone through and we've kind of cleaned up and updated the text and formatting to make it easier to read. In addition, this draft includes that community meeting guidelines that I discussed earlier. The original Master PD process proposal, it basically defaulted back to that supplemental materials and studies section that's in our development manual. Under the current one, as I just talked about, we actually updated that and created a new one specific to Master PDs. It includes those additional requirements and also identifies the 4 studies that are going to be in documents that are going to be required for any PD. And then again, we had this supplemental form initially that really was kind of focusing on the development side and more so on the zoning aspects, like what's existing, what happens if there's no action, what happens if there is action. And a lot of those terms were really more technical in nature. We have since revamped that form where it's now really more of a community impact assessment form. We're really trying to focus on the community amenities, the facilities, the schools, and try to get everyone to make sure that we're all understanding what's in the surrounding community and how those might be affected either positively or adversely depending on the development, as well as what these changes are on the site and really get a better understanding of how this project might be working with the character of the community as well. We also are requiring a look at the housing disparity impact to make sure as we're working through this, the developers also taking consideration on how that could be impacted by their development proposal. So here we are now. As I mentioned, we had kind of a long road to get here, but we are really in a good place. I feel pretty confident. We've got a pretty good draft addendum out there. This was the update was presented to the Plan Commission on October 15th. We immediately posted it to the city's website for comment starting on October 16th. As I mentioned, it's been open for a 60-day comment period, which is due to expire on December 16th. And then depending on the extent of the comments that we get in and how much drafting we need to get, excuse me, we'll make a final presentation in early 2021. I'm going to turn this over maybe to Cindy. I've got a little bit of a cold, so I just need to take a quick break.
Sure. So I think we're going to start with some questions that we received in advance of the meeting as part of people who register. So one of the requests is really someone from the public who is advocating for increased attention to innovative designs in PDs. And absolutely, you know, our Commissioner Cox is an architect, and so am I, and others here on the call. So design is definitely important to the department and you know, we have published design excellence principles as well, 10 design excellence principles. And then for all PDs, we do have the PD standards and guidelines in the zoning code. But then for many of the new projects, they also trigger compliance with design guidelines, which we've developed in different geographies. We have design guidelines for West Loop, for example, and the Chicago River. So for any developments along the river, we have those. And we are also, you know, working to develop more design guidelines. We have a neighborhood design guidelines booklet now that we've recently published. So that's definitely something we care a lot about, of course. And Master PDs is no exception. We would be looking at high-level design for Master PDs as well as our regular plan development projects as well, our standard. So that was that question. The other question, I don't know, Nancy, if you're feeling better, was about the Plan Commission members and who they are and maybe their background.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Yeah, apologies. You know, it's that cold season time. The second question we received was a request for kind of the bios on CPC members. What we've done is kind of, I'm going to pull Teresa in as needed, but I think it's important to note that the Plan Commission is made up with a very, very strong and diverse mix of professionals, both from the public and the private sector. And they have a mix of experience with and expertise with housing and transportation and architecture and planning. Teresa, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the nice balance of the commission members' backgrounds.
You know, I think you covered it, Nancy. And since there's so many questions, we can,
Okay.
and especially if you're going to make the bios available, I think we can probably just go on to the next question. But to your point, though, there are. Well, let me just say this. First of all, it's comprised of now that I say I wasn't going to say anything, now I am. But the first thing is it is comprised of the DPD commissioner and then heads of different departments within the city. And then there are several individuals who are not either. Oh, and then it's also comprised of several aldermen and alderwomen in a range of districts. And then there are a number of people who are outside either of those roles, and those folks are pretty diverse, from several architects, planning professions, housing development, restaurant unions, and so and some nonprofit group members. So I think that those groups are pretty diverse. And then of the city people, you have everyone from Parks and Rec to transportation, housing, and then, as I mentioned, the head of DPD.
Yeah. Thanks, Teresa. The next email question that we had received in advance was actually a five-part, and mostly it was comments and recommendations. So I want to read through these quickly and acknowledge that we've received them. And there are things that we will add to our list of comments that we received as we look at working on the final draft. The first of these was, there was a suggestion that the staff should be the ones, the DPD staff should be the ones to select and hire the consultants that do some of these studies, particularly the traffic studies, but the applicant should pay for those. So just acknowledging we've received that comment. There was a suggestion that members of the Plan Commission, CPC, at least 2, should attend some of these community meetings for these master PDs so that they have an opportunity to see the interaction and so that they can provide a firsthand feedback to the rest of the commission. Number 3, there was a suggestion that there be a tracking mechanism on the implementation of these master PDs and to add criteria to determine if they've changed substantially enough that it might trigger a need for there to come through a supplemental review process. The 4th suggestion from this person was to suggest that master PDs should include publicly accessible amenities such as parks and open space and river walks, playgrounds, etc. And then the 5th recommendation from this particular person was that all master PDs should contain a new CTA transit station if there is not one within a half-mile or additional CTA bus routes or increased CTA bus routes frequency. So I want to acknowledge that we've gotten all these suggestions and comments, and we will take those into consideration. The 4th and final email that we had received in advance of the meeting included several questions, and I'm going to hopefully get through these pretty quickly. The first question was, what is the criteria for determining if a required community meeting or the outreach has been successful? I would really like to turn this over to Cindy and perhaps Emily, as they've taken on a few of these master PDs recently and have actually hosted and been part of some of these community meetings.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great question. And frankly, you know, we were a little bit worried, especially with the pandemic and everybody at home working remotely, whether or not the webinar format would be successful. And you know, a good example is the Michael Reese redevelopment project, the Bronzeville Lakefront project, because that project and the community engagement process actually spanned pre-pandemic and also still ongoing post-pandemic. And, you know, when we had a community meeting, for example, in October of 2019, pre-pandemic, there was a very high level of attendance. I would say we had a community meeting and there were about 200 people who attended. But then we had another community meeting post-pandemic, and well, not post, during the pandemic. And we had it as a webinar town hall, and Alderman King hosted it. And we had over 400 participants. So in fact, we've seen more people can participate and attend. And that's just the webinar itself during live. That webinar has been recorded and it's been posted both on the Alderman's website, but also on DPD's webpage for the Michael Reese project. And so many more people have even viewed it after that community meeting date. So in a way, we're finding that this format there is a silver lining to all of this. We're able to actually engage many more people. And we've heard feedback that, you know, parents of young children, for example, they're able to listen in at the webinar, whereas in the past they would not have been able to leave their homes and go to a community meeting in a physical location. So, you know, we have received positive feedback. And then after our most recent community meeting for the North Union project, again, we had 500 registered people. Now we on the actual date of the meeting, not as many people did participate, but still we had over 500 people register, which was fantastic. So we're definitely getting the word out. And the feedback that we've received was, you know, appreciation that we've included as many people as we could. We did work closely with the community organizations in the area as well as the impacted aldermen so that they can also make sure their networks hear about the meeting. We reached out directly to, you know, certain agencies. You know, in that case, for example, we reached out to CHA, we reached out to the school that was nearby. So, you you know, we're doing our best to engage as many people as we can in the community.
Thanks, Cindy. The next question that was pre-submitted was, why is there a difference in the size thresholds for public projects versus private projects triggering the master PD development requirements? I think I touched on this a little bit, but I just wanted to reemphasize, DPD staff felt it was very important that the city, any project that either has city-owned land, any sort of city participation, because there's some, you know, some sort of city investment, perhaps funding involved with it, really, we should step down those thresholds a little bit, because oftentimes those projects not only, like I said, include some sort of a city investment, but it also often includes a project that is specifically targeted to address a neighborhood need or concern or neighborhood goal. So the idea is that the lower thresholds for city projects are really important because those tend to be very focused projects and very driven by specific goals and targets within the community area. Let's see, the next question we received in advance was, can you provide additional clarity on the deliverables required during each phase of the process? For example, should final plans and elevations be developed prior to kickoff to allow for the city development and community feedback, or developed as collaborative as part of the outreach process? I'm going to start a little bit and then I'm going to turn this over to Cindy. Our intent is honestly, we want people to come in as early as possible. We want to, like I said, we've added this concept review meeting. We want to know what you guys are thinking out from the beginning so that we can work with you to talk through any sort of issues. And the idea behind having these kind of two-staged community meetings set within our plan review or our master PD review process is we really want people to come in early enough where things are not finalized. You know, they have a good concept, but where they can take in that community input and hopefully, you know, use it towards making that project better and maybe fit in better with the community. I want to kind of turn this over to Cindy again, because she's had some real life examples for this and how this has worked.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. And it does a little bit depend on how the developer intends to proceed with their proposal. We have kind of two different examples. You know, the Michael Reese example that I mentioned before, you know, that developer has really worked hard to develop the entire framework for the master plan development. And you know, the same thing happened with the 78 and the Lincoln Yards project, where there was, you know, a master plan framework, but the actual design of specific buildings were limited to, you know, for Bronzeville Lakefront, for example, you know, they've proceeded with the design of one building, for example, and they've shown that to the community, and they intend to show that at a future plan commission meeting. On the other hand, the 78 project, they were not ready with any design of any buildings, so that was just a framework for their the massing and the siting of each of the parcels. Whereas the North Union project that Emily Thrun is managing and JDL is developing, they actually are proposing to, you know, design all of the buildings, and so we did show the community at the community meeting all of the conceptual designs. You know, just because that was what the developers is hoping to file. So it really kind of is dependent on, you know, how much information and the applicant is wanting to include in their application for the PD and how much information they would like for Plan Commission and City Council to review and approve.
Thanks, Cindy. The next question we had received was, what role does the Mayor's Office of Community Engagement play in the master PD process? I will tell you that historically, they've really not been involved. Most of the public meetings, public engagement, community engagement a lot of that has really been coordinated between the applicant with a lot of emphasis on the alderman to help facilitate the right groups of people, making sure getting the word out. And with master PDs, we're gonna, have DPD staff help with that process as well. So I think that's answers that one. Next question is there a way to focus the listed supplemental materials more closely around human-centered design? As the current requirements stand, they appear to be an approval checklist and not a means for a collaborative community feedback. I want to turn this one over to Cindy because a lot of what the project managers, but particularly with the staff designers and architects really work through those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have our own internal design review meetings. And of course, we have to use any guidelines that have been adopted by Plan Commission, and we use the PD standards and guidelines as well. And then we also have other folks in the department weigh in as well. We have expertise for landscape reviewers. We have expertise on parks and open space. We have experts internally on architecture and urban design. So it's really a process that is that brings several different people to the table to review these projects.
And to the point of human scale, I mean, that's something that the design team really spends a lot of time on, is focusing that aspect. Correct, Cindy?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially as it relates to the context, and if there's, a landmark district nearby or something, or even if it impacts the landmark district, we absolutely care about the relationship to the context and to the scale. Now, some of that is further along in the process. So, at the time where we have the first community meeting, often we don't have designs of buildings. We just have, here's the street network, here's the development parcels, here's the general bulk that we're looking at. So again, it depends on how far along and how much we are going to see as part of the application.
Great. The next question is, why are supplemental materials opt-in instead of opt-out and at the discretion of DPD? Transparency and clarity in these requirements will create a framework for more constructive community outreach for all stakeholders, including community members, designers, and developers, city staff, and departments. The way we've set this up, and this has historically been the same for all PDs, is in that development manual, there is a whole list of potential studies and supplemental materials that might be required. And everything is a case-by-case basis, because it's really important to make sure that we're tailoring these developments, but also the review documents and the studies to these particular developments. It should be geared towards the intensity of the development and really focusing on the surrounding area as well. So, it's really important that these are tailored to each individual project, and that's why it's set up that way. The next question is there a concern that a single community meeting may not be enough time for substantial community feedback in addition to a developer review of the timeline, design, diagrams, and impacts? How is this meeting going to be structured to allow for meaningful feedback and discussions in addition to the dissemination of the project information? I can say that is going to be answered fairly quickly, because we actually are recommending multiple community meetings. We recommend the pre-application community meeting or meetings, depending on how many they need, as well as meetings further along the process as the project changes. I think Cindy can attest to having multiple meetings on Michael Reese so far. And so it's as the project moves along, those community meetings are going to be set up as things evolve and the developer and the staff want to have more community input. And as mentioned before, we've encouraged more multiple platforms and mediums for getting the word out there on the projects and also soliciting input back.
And we also, sorry to chime in, Nancy, but
Yeah,
we
no,
would,
go ahead.
we would also coordinate with the impacted aldermen on, you know,
Oh,
if we should have multiple community meetings, or if there was positive feedback from one community meeting, then maybe we can continue to the next step. So we definitely work very closely with the aldermen.
Thanks, Cindy. That's a really, really important point. That is, the impacted aldermen are involved throughout that whole community process for sure. The next question is, how will maximum accessibility for residents to attend meetings be ensured in the process? Will multiple meetings be held at different times and dates? Will there be more offerings? I'm going to kick this again to Cindy because you have that practical experience of having these large meetings.
Yeah, I mean, we've typically organized them around this time in the evening so that if people have a regular working schedule, they're able to attend them. And again, for these webinars, we've recorded them. So if you can't make the date and time, which I completely understand, raising a family myself, they're recorded, and so you can easily view them afterwards. And you know, anyone can email us, dpd@cityofchicago.org, their comments, really at any time. So
thanks. And then the final question that came in through the pre-submittal, DPD creating a website for each project or development is a positive step towards creating a two-way dialogue for master PDs. Is there a plan for when, what, or who will update the website? Again, I'm going to defer to Cindy because she's got that experience for this one.
well, whoever's managing the project. So in those cases, the ones that we have on our website are all being updated by our group in the central region. And then Kevin on our staff also makes sure that there's a kind of uniform treatment on our webpage. And he actually does the day-to-day updating of our website, but we provide him with the content. And then we work also with others. You know, CDOT also provides us input if it's infrastructure related updates, especially when it relates to things like the 78 or Lincoln Yards, where we're at the point of, you know, really it's just infrastructure.
Great. That is the end of the pre-submitted questions, and it looks like we've had some really good community participation. So I am gonna jump to, okay, good. It looks like some of these have been answered. I'm gonna jump into these in the order that they came in. How will community concerns and responses from the developer be documented by DPD? Cindy, you want to take that one?
So I think it depends on how we get the questions and comments. In the case, for example, of North Union, you know, we did respond in the Q&A of the webinar, and we also again posted the webinar recording so that you heard the Q&A in the discussion towards the end of the meeting. But also we are responding to comments as we get them directly, and sometimes it's directly from the developer or from DPD, depending on the content of the question.
Great. I'm going to kick back to a couple earlier questions that actually were answered. Someone asked to get the link to where these documents are. Thank you, Kevin, for responding to that. Someone else asked about, say that they have a professional service firm and how did they find out about these projects early. Thank you, Noah, for responding and letting him know that the Plan Commission website lists these projects as the notices go out. But also, as we mentioned before, these master PDs are going to have community meetings and websites. So these projects are going to be identified early on. I have one here from Alderman Dowell. Thank you for joining us. How is the waterfront site determined, and how far from the city lakefront before the site is not considered a waterfront site? Thank you, Noah, again, for responding immediately. It is specified in the ordinance, and Noah has provided the specific web session for that. Let's see.
Nancy, can you give some specifics? There's several questions that are asked about the community impact statement. You know, what will go into it? Someone asked, for example, will environmental effects be included in the community impact statement? What's on that form? How is that form being constructed? Maybe you can give some more detail on that.
Yeah, the right now the community impact assessment form is again, it's one of the documents that is available and viewable online. And right now it's a 3-page questionnaire. The first section really focuses on getting some details about the community. What are the demographics? What are the amenities and facilities, schools, parks, those types of things that are in the immediate area? We request that they provide not only, acknowledge whether there are parks and schools in this area, but also a map that identifies where these amenities and these parks are. And then we also ask them to provide a community assessment narrative that talks about the character of the neighborhood, talk about the housing, talk about, basically what's there, because we want to make sure that we're understanding what potential impacts these projects could have, both positive and adversely. It could be very positive as well. And then we get into details and ask them for more details about the specific kind of incremental changes. How many additional housing units are you putting on there? How many additional parking spaces? We want to understand what this incremental changes for this project. One of the big reasons for this community kind of impact assessment form is, number one, we want this filled out and submitted early on in the process, because that's really going to help guide the master or the DPD project manager and their regional team to really look at what types of studies do we need? What kind of additional information are we going to need? Do we need them to take that step further and do this kind of community impact assessment? What types of project is it, and what types of studies are going to need? So it's really kind of the framework that's kind of sets one of the kind of background data sources for the staff to really be able to say, gosh, this is going to be a lot of additional units. We need to look at how is this going to impact the schools, for example. It's going to be setting the framework for the types of studies and additional materials that are going to be needed.
So thank you, Nancy. And I would say, since that's one of the documents that's open for comment, I would really encourage people to make sure that they are commenting then on what else needs to be in that, because you laid out, for example, a number of features that are kind of contribute to an analysis of existing conditions, sort of what's there. And I think if people have ideas on what should be considered for the impact, this would be a good time to give input. So for example, Alderwoman Dowell said, for example, that community impacts should also speak to the existing infrastructure capacity. And so that's an example not only of starting out with what might be the analysis of the existing condition, what is that capacity, but then to ask, okay, what would be the impact of this project on that capacity? Will it be more infrastructure built? Or will DPD then say, well, if there needs to be more infrastructure built, what does it mean for the strains on that infrastructure? So I think that's an example of what what should probably be in there on that form as a question.
That's good feedback. And the feedback that as well about will we be sharing or posting these studies? That's something we definitely need to consider as well. I think it's the first time we're hearing that, so let us consider that.
And to your point, Cindy, I think it's really also very interesting that there's a lot of questions here that you may or may not be able to answer tonight, but they're just exactly what you said. They're the kinds of questions that then you take back and say, well, based on that question, maybe we need to think through this process or this decision and so on. So I think these are really useful and interesting questions and that are being posed here.
I would say too, Chairwoman, that you know, some of these comments, is DPD going to support the project even after, you know, the community meeting? And if there were a lot of concerns raised, you know, from the community meeting. And, you know, that's a fair question, but I do want to say, just as a real example, you know, some comments we hear from the community are, oh, it should be shorter. But other folks from the community express that they think it should be taller. So there's sometimes conflicting opinions, which is totally expected, right? Everyone is coming from a different point of view. So I think it also depends if there are folks who are complaining about their impact to their views, as Alderman Burnett has often said in his community meetings, you know, the zoning code and the PD review doesn't consider the impact of people's views from their apartments. So, you know, we have to kind of make a decision based on if there's a consensus of opinion, but also if it's aligned with our zoning PD standards and guidelines, if the concern is aligned with that. And that's really where we would be focused on.
Cindy, that's a really, really great point. And so many of the kinds of comments we get represent those kind of differing opinions about how it affects their view, how it, you know, what they perceive to be too much or too little congestion and so on. But if you notice throughout all these comments here, there's several that get raised around environmental justice issues, for example. So there it's not a matter of convenience or, you know, whether or not my view has been, you know, obstructed, which I'm not saying those aren't important considerations, but like you say, they, as Alderman Burnett says, you know, we may not have the jurisdiction to sort of decide on that because it's not in the zoning code. But with these environmental justice issues, those might be less a matter of taste or than a more matter of like life and death, right? And health or good health or bad health. So,
Yes.
so what I'm wondering, and this may be a tougher one to answer, but and maybe Nancy, you can sort of take this because there's also a number of questions here that ask about criteria, and are we going to be considering different criteria? So there's a lot that we can do in this process, and then there's some things that we can't because it requires going back to the city council. So maybe out of this process can be some recommendations to take back to city council on how to expand the ordinances and therefore the criteria. Can you speak a little bit to that?
I can, and I want to, I just want to kind of re-emphasize, as you two were talking, I've been having the opportunity to skim through these questions, and thank you everyone for participating tonight, because we are getting some really, really good questions that are coming in. And as both Teresa and Cindy have said, it's not going to be possible for us to answer them all tonight, but it's already getting us thinking about things we need to change on some of these forms. And I urge everyone to, you know, if you haven't looked at that community impact assessment form, please look at that one for sure. And if you have any additional comments on that, send those to dpd@cityofchicago.org. We are going to take all these comments and questions and pull them into, you know, additional revisions and make sure that we get responses out as well. But to your point, the code is very clear that it charges the zoning administrator with the ability to create what we call a development manual. So, you know, that's what we have right now. And it talks about the way we can have the process for review. It talks about what the zoning administrator, you know, through the commissioner can require and request through these review processes. But in terms of the standards for development or the standards for review of PDs themselves, those things are embedded in the zoning ordinance. So there's certain things that we can do through the authority that's given to the zoning administrator to allow us to do some of these improvements on the process and the changes. There are other things that may require some changes to the code and to those criteria to get some more detailed, I guess, teeth on some of the review criteria for the Plan Commission.
You know, and Nancy, if I could add one more thing here, you know, because these questions that were posed to us about, you know, what happens if the project is quote unquote bad, And I assume bad in terms of health or just beyond sort of issue of taste or inconvenience, but like really sort of bad for health. I mean, I'm not sure that we can answer that tonight, but it's an interesting question, I think, for DPD to ponder, right? What are the ways in which those kinds of concerns can be addressed? Because I mean, they're tough concerns. They're tough issues. But
Right.
because they're tough, it's easy to sort of say, well, we can't deal with that, right? But through this process, even if to the extent that we can make changes, and then to the extent that which we can't, we can recommend changes. But how do we actually deal with these in a way that doesn't just toss them aside, but really, really looks carefully at some of those issues? I mean, I understand sort of the difficulty when you have that, Nancy's pointing out or Cindy rather is pointing out when you have different points of view, but I don't think this is so much that, right? So, and I'm not saying necessarily that we have to answer that tonight, although if you want to comment, of course, feel free, but I don't think I think those are such tough issues that we should think, is there a way to think through those questions? I mean, those are tough ones.
Yeah.
Think those through.
Yeah, there's and again, I think what I'd like to do is just kind of acknowledge again, there's questions about the thresholds, the criteria, what's going to be the criteria for when we're going to require this community services, facilities, and housing study. What happens if as you're saying, the impacts are found and they're substantial, right? The potential impacts. So there's a lot of really good questions here that we're going to have to spend a little bit of time to go through.
Nancy, can we also acknowledge there are aldermen on this call and staff from aldermen's offices? And also I noticed it's Sarah Lyons, who's a member of the Planning Commission or Plan Commission.
Yes.
Is also on this call or on this webinar or this meeting.
Yep. You are absolutely right. We've got obviously, Alderman Dahl has submitted some great comments and questions. I've seen some questions from directly from Alderman Burnett. It's my understanding that we also, Sarah Lyons, right, from the Plan Commission. It's my understanding we also have representatives from Alderman Riley's and Alderman Hopkins' offices in attendance, because a lot of these, to be honest, a lot of these larger scale, what we're going to call master PDs, really are in the downtown. They're in that, Cindy's smiling, mostly in the central region. So, that is Alderman Dahl and Alderman Burnett and Alderman Riley and Alderman Hopkins's areas, as well as Sito Lopez, the 78 down there. So, yeah, we've got a good cross connect. And I also want to acknowledge that when we did get the registration list, I think there was a number of developers and architects and also a lot of people that just said, I'm not affiliated with anything, I'm just a resident. So, we got a really, really good cross connect of people, and we agree that this is really important. So I just want to thank everyone again.
And nobody is ever just a resident anyway, right?
Well,
well, I know you're not saying that. I'm saying that.
Yeah, I'm just saying they're not a developer. They're not an attorney. They're not an architect that works on projects. They're on the other side.
Oh, I know you're
right?
Not, yeah.
Yes, there's someone who's potentially impacted by one of these developments. So, I think we've got a good cross sample of people who are participating and providing us good comments here.
Do you want to keep going, or are you gonna, did you plan on stopping at the time that you said?
We were trying to keep this to an hour to be mindful of everyone's time. So I do want to just quickly scroll through and see if there's anything that we can just do a quick hit on. But I think most of these comments are really, really good comments that we are going to need to pull in and look at as we make revisions or updates to the current documents, or consider on how we're going to expand them. I don't know, Cindy, Teresa, Emily, are you guys seeing anything that we can?
Alderman Burnett, go ahead, Cindy.
I'm sorry, there were a couple of questions about how long this process takes. And another excellent question that's kind of like, if I had a crystal ball, I would love it to know. It's going to range. It's going to range on how complicated the project is. If there's a lot of new infrastructure proposed, that takes kind of a while to figure out. If there's new transit proposed, that's going to be a lot of coordination with the impacted transit agencies. So it kind of depends on the complexity of the project. It's a really difficult question to answer, but we do our best, to work with, again, the aldermen and development team and the impacted agencies to really try to keep moving forward and keep progressing and making sure that everyone understands, what our concerns are and what the standards are and what the guidelines are. So, we just try to, react as thoroughly, but as also quickly as possible. Knowing that time is money, of course, but that we have to be careful about these projects because, they'll be with us
For a very long time.
Right.
If I can add to that, Cindy, and I think one of the reasons that the mayor had initial interest right on, or not that she doesn't still, but her initial interest I think was also tied in with the notion around transparency and so on. And one of the things that I talked about early on is that the developers, from my experience, seem to want certainty. That sort of the knowing ahead of time what is expected of them is much easier than sort of the vagueness, right? And so I think that clarity, that certainty is better for everybody. And if community folks and other stakeholders have an opportunity to be involved early on, then there aren't those surprises later on. There aren't those issues later on, and there's more opportunity to find solutions and create win-win situations. And so I think the idea is not to make the process unnecessarily long. In fact, if anything, this actually helps make the process better because you're not having to sort of retrace your steps because you didn't include a community. But now you need to do it early and you need to do it consistently through the process. And so it actually saves time later on when then you're having to because you didn't earlier.
I also noticed a question here talking about, making sure that we get the word out to all interested people. And I would say that was a common thread from the original round of questions that we had. And that's why we included the community meeting guidelines within this addendum, because what we really want to emphasize is the particular for master PDs, these community areas really, really do extend sometimes a mile, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a little bit more. So the impacts of these developments, because they can be so large and have such a incremental increase over the intensity and the density that's there, we really do want to make sure, and that's one of the important things that we've highlighted, is make sure that we're defining those community areas up front and try to identify the residents and the stakeholders and everyone that should be participating and for which we should be soliciting input.
One of the other things too is a series of comments that we got early on was several people indicate they'd like to see this kind of process expanded just beyond the master plan projects. So right now the focus is on the master plan, but it may open up then or the opportunity to look at the review processes more generally and how we might apply some of these same standards and practices to beyond just the master plan development process. But at least to start with, we're starting with the master plan development process.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the biggest takeaways for better for worse is through this COVID thing, I think we've realized how effective these these webinars or these community virtual public meetings and how they really can be used in a very efficient way to supplement our traditional community meetings once we get past this. So, I think there's going to be a lot of tools that are going to just easily and naturally transfer, even though we're just focusing on master PDs right now.
Looks good.
Okay. I just want to check our panel once again. Did anyone else see any other quick hit questions? Again, we are going to take all of these. Gosh, thank you so much. There's some really, really good questions here, and thank you for your participation. Any other quick hit questions or any other closing comments that our panelists would like to make tonight?
I'm wondering about, there's a question here, this is kind of outside the scope of this, but not irrelevant, about, somebody asked about emergency planning protocols. How does that get, I mean, again, that's one of those questions probably that you're all gonna have to maybe look at when you look at this afterwards, but I wonder if there's any initial comments on that you might have. Did you see that one?
Yeah, I think that's gonna be one that we're going to involve some more people in.
And then Alderman Burnett had asked a question about what triggers. He asked, what are some of the triggers for, or when does it kick in, I think is the word he used. And I think did he mean the criteria for when these apply? There was a
I think so. And I think, John, we got a question from the Alderman Hopkins' office, kind of similar. Like, what if there's a project that they're just under the threshold? So, those are good questions too. Nancy, I don't know if you want to put up the slide with the thresholds again. So, and the question was, are these firm? And again, we're in the public comment period. So I think if we get a lot, public comments about reconsidering those thresholds, that's fair for us to consider. And that is a good question about if they're just under the thresholds. Anytime you draw a line, there's going to be people who try to sneak through underneath. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm still sharing my screen at this point, but I've put up the thresholds again, and you're absolutely right. And we, I just kind of want to expand on that comment, because we looked at this and we really looked at, again, this was the reason why we put in these gross and net and total and increased areas, because we really wanted to make sure we captured those projects that really have that large scale or that large transitional kind of effect on an area. And something to keep in mind is these are ORs. So it's a net 15 acres or, 4 million total square feet. But again, as Cindy mentioned, this is our public comment period. So, we really want to get some feedback on these thresholds and everything else that we've presented both tonight and that's been available on the website.
So let's wrap this up, Nancy.
Yeah. So again, I'm going to turn to our team, see if there's any closing comments from anyone else. I again want to, I'm really, really thankful that so many people chose to spend your time with us this evening. We got some really good questions, and we are going to take them all in and make sure that we consider all of these as we move forward in this process. Teresa?
Yes, first of all, I really want to again thank everyone for your time and attention to this. This will only be as good as your participation and the questions and the comments that you make. I know that staff is particularly Nancy has put a lot of time into working on this, and I think that so I want to thank staff, and I want to thank you for being here this evening. This is I think we're gonna, this is from my point of view, this should be an ongoing effort. This is an opportunity we have now. And this is sort of, step one in this, and there's a lot more work to be done. And I look forward to when we can have the conversation with the city councilors, with the aldermen about criteria as well, and how we expand the criteria, because one of the things that's really difficult for plan commissioners and probably for zoning commissioners and aldermen themselves is a lot of the bases for making judgments aren't necessarily listed in the criteria. And I think there's a lot of conversation that we can have about making sure that the kinds of criteria that need to be considered are considered in these decisions. And I think that's often when people walk away frustrated because a decision got made that maybe didn't take into account criteria that it should have. So all of that won't be considered in this, mostly because we don't have the power to. But right on the heels of it, I think the idea then is to move into that, and then we'll need everybody's focus on that. We'll take a lot of what we gain from this process forward into that one. That one's going to be, that one's going to involve a lot of conversation, probably even more conversation. But I think that that answer to the question of what happens when it's a project that may not be good for the neighborhood. Part of what we want to do is have ways to measure that, where it's not just a matter of opinion, but we've got that criteria and we've got ways to measure those criteria, so that when those decisions, when they're up for decision, we can say, well, we'd love to do that, but this is based on the criteria and based on the evidence being demonstrated here. We know this is going to have this impact, and we may need to not approve it, or maybe have mitigation measures, but the idea is to take care of some of these issues, even ones that maybe shouldn't go forward, early on, so that people don't have to invest the time and money and heartache as we do this. But again, I think this is an opportunity. Mayor Lightfoot has said, that she wants to have the transparency in the process, and so this is a great opportunity, including myself as chair and with the staff that's open to doing this. I know Nina Amudia has worked really hard on this with you, Nancy, in some of the early stages, and in another position to sort of help see some of this through. But it's a lot of detail, a lot of work, a lot of effort, and so I thank all of staff, and I thank all of you for taking the time out of your evening. And so go have dinner now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.